Google's new AI coding tool, Antigravity, has quickly become one of the most powerful development tools to be ever created. It's completely changing how we're able to build apps by using nothing more than a single prompt. But here's the thing. Most people are only focusing on 20% of its true potential. By connecting anti-gravity to more powerful apps, you're able to build apps that are 10 times capable and unlock a whole new level of potential. In this video, I'll be showing you exactly how anti-gravity works, talking about what separates beginners from pros, and I'll walk you through how to build a full stack app by connecting n8n to anti-gravity. So, if you're ready, let's dive in. All right, so let's talk about how anti-gravity actually works. So here I have this diagram and it just explains how everything works from when you initially started using it as a user to how everything flows inside anti-gravity to then give you your finished app. So we start with you. You're the user, you're the one using anti-gravity to actually create this app. And there are two actions that you can perform with anti-gravity. You can either edit the code or you can describe the task. And I'll talk more about what these mean in this context. So, editing the code doesn't mean that you're the one writing the code, because here we do have our AI agent that writes the code for us. But let's say, for example, you wanted to edit something in the code, you do get access to the files, or if you wanted to maybe add some code, if you are technical, you can do that as well. But you don't have any need to do that because let's say, for example, there's an issue in the code, you could always just tell the AI agent, this is the issue I have, and it could debug it for you as well, which is super cool. And next we have the task of actually describing what you want the AI agent to do. So from doing those two tasks, you have two views. You have this agent's manager, and this is where you're able to actually chat with the agents, kind of like how you chat with ChatGPT or any of these AI agents, just saying, this is what I want you to do. And here you can think of it as the command center. So this is where you're able to tell the agent what you want to do, tell the agent what you want to get fixed, and actually see the progress of how the agent is thinking about everything and everything that went down in the chat. So you see it in the agent manager. And when you're debugging, actually, you can actually just look, you don't have to look at the code, but you can just look at the final output and just see, okay, I don't like this, change this. And that's basically how you can debug using the agent manager. So we come to the editor, and this is where the code files are stored. And it looks kind of like an IDE. And an IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. So basically where people can write code, short term. So that's something like VS Code, which is also a platform that people use to write code. So it looks very similar to that. You can store files, write code, access the terminal, all that good stuff. But here's where the power of anti-gravity starts to set in. When we come out from that stage, let's say, for example, you've given a task like, okay, I want you to actually create an application for me that does this particular thing. It then passes that information to our AI agents. So our AI agent has access to the editor, and it also has access to this agent manager where we're able to actually send the commands. So what our AI agent does is it actually builds these applications for us. So it first plans, so it actually thinks about, okay, what are the components that I need to add into this application? It then writes the code and it goes ahead to actually test it. And you might be wondering, how is it able to do all these things? But it has access to these three things over here. It has access to an LLM model. So these are things like Gemini 3 Pro, Claude, and GPT. And Gemini is basically from Google, Claude is from Anthropic, and we have GPT from OpenAI. And then we have the browser. So that's a built-in Chrome. So how it's actually able to test this application is it could actually use that built-in browser to open up the application and actually test out application, type into forms, click things, and just to make sure the app is working. So that's what happens in the run and the testing phase. which is where most of this other platforms that we see today can do right now. They don't have this testing, auto testing feature and also fixing it based on maybe field tests and all that. We also have MCP servers, and this is very powerful because with MCP servers, you get access to a wide variety of apps. So we have things like n8n, Gmail, Notion, any app that you can think of that has an API. You basically can get access to it using MCP servers. And this AI agent works autonomously. So it's able to actually work without you having to say, okay, do this, do that, do this, do that. So once it has access to this MCP servers, it's actually able to intuitively know what it needs to connect and then access it from the MCP servers that you connect to anti-gravity. So this AI agent can then do two things. It has writes to and creates. So basically, it can write your code and it stores your code into your workspace, which is basically the project folder that exists locally on your computer. And we also have create artifacts. So just as I said before, the AI agent really goes step by step to think and actually plan out how this application is going to look like. So in the artifacts, based on the plan is created, it actually puts down a task list. And this is kind of like a to-do list. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this first. I'm going to do this first. And as it goes down that task list, it actually check marks what is done, which is super cool. So you can actually keep track of what has been implemented and what is yet to be implemented. We also have the plan, the screenshots, the recordings. So basically, the AI agent is also able to make a demo of your application. So that is also super cool. And at the end, you have your finished application. Awesome. So now let's dive into anti-gravity. So here we have Google's anti-gravity, and what you have to do is you have to download it onto your system, so onto your computer. And we have this download for Mac OS because I use a Mac. But if you click over here to downloads, you can see the different options for Mac OS, Windows, Linux. So just make sure you download the one that is related to your computer. After that, you're going to open anti-gravity, and I already have anti-gravity set up. So first thing is you want to follow the setup instructions and answer some onboarding questions. And you're going to have something that says setup flow. So just make sure that that is set to start fresh. After that, you want to select your theme. So it could be light mode, dark mode, just anything that fits with you really well. So select that. Then next step, it will be review driven development. So make sure you select that. And it will also ask you to sign into your Google account. So you just have to accept the terms of use. And after that, you should be good to go. Awesome. So diving into anti-gravity, I'm just going to give you a quick walkthrough of the interface so we can understand where everything is and to make sure that we have the right configurations for our settings. So here, first thing you see is you see a lot of stuff, and it might look really techy if you're not a technical person, but we're going to break it down so it's really intuitive. So we have three components here on this page. We have here at the left-hand side, the Explorer. We have in the middle, this anti-gravity, and then we have at this side, which is where we're going to talk to our agent. So basically the agent manager. So over here where we see this open folder, this is where you're able to create your folder for your workspace. So how this works is you have to create a folder on your local computer, and this is where the agent is actually going to store all the artifacts, all the code. So basically anything that it's using to actually build this app. And then over here, this is where we're going to see anti-gravity actually doing its thing. So it's actually going to be putting out the code. So this is where the code editor is going to show up. And at the side over here, the right-hand side, we have the chat area, which is where we're able to actually talk to our agents to actually do different things in our software application. And just coming more into this agent manager, we can see that we have the initial chat interface, which is where we can type and tell it, for example, build this certain application for me. We also have these models over here, which is basically the brain of our agents. And I want to talk about this because this is really important when actually using your agents over here is selecting the model to use. So we have different models here. We have Gemini 3 Pro, we have Claude Sonnet 4.5, Claude Opus 4.5, and we also have GPT. So over here, these different models serve for different purposes. For example, we have the Gemini 3 Pro, and that is really good for when you want to make your web app or your software really visually appealing. How everything looks on the front end, which is basically the part that people can see in your software, like for this web apps, then you want to go with Gemini 3 Pro. We also have Claude Sonnet and Claude Opus 4.5. These are really good for code. So anything that has to do with more complex, more, deeply structured architecture for your softwares, then you just want to go with Claude. So anything with super techie code, Claude is your best friend. And when we come to GPT, it's very good when you're doing everyday tasks and things that are really intuitive. So if you're working with tasks like that, go with GPT. Next, we also have this section that says planning. So we have the conversational mode. And this basically says, how do you want your AI agent to actually tackle certain things? So we have planning and we have fast. So planning is where your agent actually plans before it goes ahead to execute. So it writes down step by step what it needs to do. Like one, I need to do this, two, I need to do this. And it's really good because you, as the builder, can see how your AI agent is actually looking at tackling that task. And if you have to intervene, maybe put a comment somewhere to change something, you can do that as well. And we also have this fast. So the agent will just do as it goes. Like it just continues doing as the things go on, as things pop up, it makes, which is not really good when you're building a software, especially powerful software, because you really want to take your time with it. So I'd advise going with planning because then you're able to have the bulletproof step by step. And if there's any issues, you can see where the AI agent failed and then help to fix that. So next, I want to talk about some important settings that you need to change just to make sure everything is running smoothly here in Antigravity. So usually, if you come over here to Antigravity, you have different things that can happen. When your agent is actually building these softwares, sometimes it asks you questions like, should I proceed with the next step? And you don't want to have that happen because if you're building something that's really large and really complex, having the agent have to have you verify each step could be really time consuming. And personally, I want to, give my instructions and do other things and come back and it should be done. And if there's any mistakes, we can then just debug it, which is basically saying fix the code, which is basically saying, hi, you did this wrong. Could you do it again in the chat? And it fixes it for you. So to change this setting, we want to come here to your settings and we want to go to open anti-gravity user settings. Here we have different things. We have the review policy and we have the terminal command auto execution. Here I already have it as always proceed. So for you, it should be something else. So just make sure you set it to always proceed like this. Now, is this the safest thing to do? No, but at the same time, especially if you're not a technical user, you don't always understand every little step is doing. So it's best to let it do what it's doing. And during testing, you can actually see what could be improved and what could be changed. But if you're working on something that's really sensitive and you really want to verify each step, make sure you actually set this to request review. So here, you're able to actually have a request from the agent before it proceeds to the next step. Awesome. And just to talk about some final things with the interface before we dive into building our very powerful app, let's actually look at some other things here. So over here, we have code search, source control, run and debug, remote explorer, and extensions. You don't really need to use any of these things, but just for you to know what they do, this is basically use the code search to search for specific parts in your code. And then we also have the source control. If you're a more technical person, this is where things like version control come in, and we have the run and debug. And this is what you also need to use if you want to run your code, which is basically just testing it out, or if you want to debug your code, which is basically just fixing the issues. We also have the remote explorer. You don't really need to use this, and the extensions. And the extensions is basically like a marketplace or like an app store where you can see different apps that you can add on to Antigravity as you go. But you don't need to use this as well. But it's always good to know that these exist. So as you build your skill sets, you're able to know what these things are and how to use them as well. So coming back to our agent manager, in these three dots, we see some additional options. So we have the customizations, which is basically just customizing your AI agent to make it more powerful, more custom to yourself. But I won't be talking too much about that today. And then we have the MCP servers, which I really like with Antigravity because it gives it this extra layer of power, which is really important. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. And with that, you're actually able to connect to any app that has an API publicly, which is really good as well, because when you give your agent access to those MCP servers, is able to take actions using those apps to make your application and software more powerful. And I'll be diving into later on more about MCP servers so you can understand exactly how it works within Antigravity. Perfect. So for example, today we're going to be building an application using n8n and anti-gravity. So using n8n, we're going to use it as the back end and we're going to use anti-gravity as the front end. So what does this actually mean? The front end of an application is the part that you're readily seeing. So where you have the buttons that you can click on, everything that you can see visually with the software. And the back end is the thing that handles the more complex part of your application and actually completing the task that we need to be accomplished. So for our particular use case for today, we're going to build a dashboard where we're able to automatically send proposals to our clients. But before we think about anti-gravity and how we're going to make everything look really nice in the front end, we have to think about the back end first, which is actually putting together the system that's going to accomplish this task for us. And then from there, when we have a way to actually accomplish the task, we then connect the front end, which is our first starting point to run the back end to connect and do the task. And how you're able to connect anti-gravity to n8n is using MCPs. But first, what is an MCP? So now let's talk about Model Context Protocol, MCP. And this is basically a way that you can connect to apps without actually connecting to them individually. So what that looks like in our case with anti-gravity is that we have our AI agent and our AI agent is building this application for us. And let's say, for example, we want to talk to a third-party application. We're able to send a request to this MCP hub to say, for example, send this information to my workflow in n8n, or maybe send an email to my Gmail tool. And that MCP hub is actually able to give the AI agent access to perform all those things with those tools. So now the question is like, why is this so important? Now, before, how we do this is we have our AI agents and we actually have to individually, one by one, connect all these applications for our AI agent to actually have access to perform those specific actions on them. But this gets time consuming very fast. Because let's say you're only using like two apps, like it's really easy, it's just two. But if you have 1,000+ apps, then it just takes up a lot of time. And this MCP hub is a really nice way to just get everything connected and it saves you a lot of time as well. So now what you have is the ability to actually send a request with your AI agent, and your AI agent is actually able to access all these 1,000 apps to actually perform the actions that you needed to perform for you. Awesome. So to set up n8n inside Antigravity, what we're going to do is we're going to come to those three dots. We're going to click on MCP servers. So here we see the MCP store, which is basically like an app store for different softwares that you can give anti-gravity access to actually automatically perform actions. So let's say, for example, you come to something like Stripe. All you'd have to do is just click install, and you just have to put a secret key or a token or an API key over there. But for something like n8n, it doesn't have this. So for example, if we go over to the store and we search for n8n, we see that there's no n8n MCP server over here. So what we have to do is that we have to customly install that. All right, so to set up n8n, we want to come to manage MCP servers. When we click on that, we see this view raw config file. So we want to click on that because now we want to actually configure n8n customly. So we click on that, we see this empty file. And what we need to do now is we need to head over to n8n and get the JSON that actually have our API token and just information on how the configuration should go with n8n. Awesome. So now we're in n8n. You want to go to the settings. And for me personally, I'm using a self-hosted instance. So it will say instance level MCP. But if you're on the cloud version, then it will say MCP access. So you just want to click on that. It's exactly the same thing after that point. And in here, you want to go to connected clients and you want to see connection instruction. Click on connection details. And here, you just want to regenerate your access token and copy the configuration JSON. So when you actually copy this configuration JSON, make sure you don't share with anyone because then they have access to your n8n, which is not good at all. So coming back to anti-gravity, you just want to paste that JSON in this config file and then hit save. So now we can X this out and we just want to refresh over here. So now that we've refreshed, we've seen that our n8n MCP is connected and we have these three different things we can do. We can search workflows, execute workflows, or get workflow details, which is what our agent is going to be using to actually connect to the back end and get access to that n8n automation. If you want, you can switch off any of these. So just make sure you leave it how you need. For me in particular, we're going to be using all of these today. So I'm going to leave it exactly as is. So over here, we have our n8n automation, which is basically what's actually going to automatically send these proposals to those clients. So how this is going to work is here we have this workflow, and we're basically going to tell our application that whenever I fill in this certain information about a particular client to send a custom proposal, then I want you to call on this workflow. And that's going to be able to happen because anti-gravity has access through the MCP. And we also have this webhook over here. And basically, the webhook is used to receive information. So looking into our webhook over here, we see this URL, which is our webhook URL. So we're going to give this URL to our app when we're building it to say, whenever I'm filling this information, I want you to send this information to this webhook URL. So basically, this URL is what's going to receive the information and then actually start the workflow. So coming into here, you just want to make sure that this is set to post. And another important thing is here we have this respond. And you always want to use respond to webhook node because what usually happens if you don't use this, it will just run and send the information and you don't have any way to actually tell if the automation was run. But when you use this respond to webhook node, you'd receive the information, it would trigger the workflows to start working, and it would actually run through all the steps. And at the end, it will send us a signal that the workflow was completed, which is really neat. So just to walk through the workflow so you understand what's happening here is that first we have our web app, and when we send in some particular information, we receive that information here in our n8n. And from there, we just capture the information over here. So in our use case, we're going to be using proposals, And in this particular proposal, we're going to be using the templates. So this is really good for use cases where you always have the same services offered. So you just have to change some variables in your proposals when offering it to a new client. So things like client name, client company, the service, project description, duration, and so on. So we just captured that information that we inputted on the dashboard. And then after that, we want to get our proposal templates, which I have over here, which is basically where we're going to just change some of the information in here. And next, we want to actually edit the proposal with the updated information. So just based on what I imputed on the dashboard. And after that, we want to download the accepted proposal and send the proposal to the clients. And after that, we get a signal back saying everything was good to go and the proposal has been sent to the clients. Perfect. So now let's build our front end with anti-gravity. So coming back to anti-gravity, I'm just going to X out the things that we had here. And first thing you want to do is you want to create a folder on your local device. So as I said earlier, this is where all the code is going to be in. This is where you're going to have access to all the artifacts, anything that the agent creates. So you want to make sure that you create that. And to do that, we want to click on open folder over here, or you could also click on this big button here. And what we want to do is we want to create a new folder. So I'm just going to open a new folder, click new folder over here. I'm just going to name it n8n proposal app. And we're just going to create it and open it up. You want to click on yes, I trust the authors. Awesome. So now we're inside our workspace. And we can see that we have our directory over here. We're able to actually see all the artifacts. We have our agent manager where we're going to type in the prompts. And then we have here where we're actually going to see our agent building everything. Awesome. Now this app is very easy to build, but how I like to approach things is I like to think of what is important for this application. What do I need to do next? And the first thing that comes to my mind is how the application is actually going to look like. So first thing I want to do is I want to come here and click on this new file, and I want to input my brand guidelines. So I'm typing brand guidelines .md, and this stands for dot markdown. So .md is markdown. So when I'm thinking about this, because sometimes if you let anti-gravity actually figure out how everything's going to look visually, it doesn't do such a great job. And sometimes you might have some certain requirements on how you want everything to look in terms of fonts, color, the typography, how you want everything to be messaged. So that is important as well. So I'm just going to paste this in here. And here we're basically talking about my brand name, how you should actually write it, and just some logos like minimalism, do's and don'ts, the color palette, and things like that. So after doing this, the next thing we need to do is actually prompt our agent to start building our app. And as you know, the output is only as good as the prompt that you give the agent. It's just like when you're talking to someone and you don't give it clear instructions, you can't expect to see a really clear output. So coming over to the agent manager, I'm just going to paste in our prompt. And here we have a very detailed prompt, but I'll be walking through it so you understand how everything works together. So here we have create a dashboard, and in the dashboard have a tab where I can auto send client proposals. In there, I should be able to type in client proposal details. So just to give you some more context, coming over to our proposal template, here we can see that in our proposal, we have certain fields that we need to change, certain variables. For example, we have this client name, client company, proposal date, and so on. So that is what I'm describing in the prompt so that you just understand what's going on there. So back to the prompt, I have in there, I should be able to type in client proposal details like the client full name. And then I wanted to actually send that to n8n using those variables that we spoke about earlier that are present in our templates. We have client company name, and it's going to send it to n8n like this, client email, client project description, specific service, and so on. And then once this information is connected, it then sends the actual information over to the webhook in our n8n workflow, And the name of our workflow is called anti-gravity send underscore proposal. So you find that just over here in your n8n in your workflow name. So you just want to copy that in. We also have, in case you don't find the workflow by name, here's the ID. Because I found that sometimes it finds it easier to use the ID as well. And coming back to n8n, where you can actually find that, if you go over here, you can see it here right after the workflow. So that's important as well. So we just input that there. Next, we have it is important that when you're making the dashboard, make sure to follow the brand guidelines.md. So you just have to make sure that this is spelled exactly like we have it over here. And I'm just double checking as well. Okay, good to go. Which is included in the project folder, and make sure there's no errors in sending data over to n8n. And then you also want to give it the webhook URL, which we can copy here in our workflow. Just copy the test URL and paste it over here. Awesome. And then we have at the end, once everything is done with n8n, I want in the dashboard for it to indicate to me that it was successful and the proposal has been sent to the client. Awesome, good to go. So right now our model is set as Gemini 3 Pro, but we actually want to change this to Claude Opus 4.5 Thinking because this is a more complex task that has to do with more code in-depth things. So we want to put it as that. And as usual, we want this to be planning. And we'll just send that over. One thing I forgot to mention is make sure you save your brand guidelines.md file so your agent can actually see it as well. So over here, we can see that it's actually creating everything. And right now it's testing out how everything works. And the blue lines you see over here basically means that it's testing out the software, which is super cool. So you can see that it does the whole system from actually building it out to testing it out by itself because it has access to this Chrome, built-in Chrome, that it can use to then test out the workflow. So one thing I want to talk about is context length and rate limiting. So right now, Google hasn't been super clear on where things go with how long you can talk to the AI agent, how many conversations you can have with the AI agent before it basically tells you to stop or maybe upgrade or something like that, or maybe give you a limit like 5 days to wait before you're able to access it. It hasn't happened to me yet. But I think this is something that you should keep in mind when using this, especially if you use the software a lot. So what it did is it created a task. So basically from planning to implementation to verification and wrote out exactly step by step what it needs to do to then build out this application. And as we saw earlier, it actually went on to test everything by itself, which was super cool. And right now it is giving me the walkthrough, which is basically showing me what was built, how it works, and how everything operates right now. So in the walkthrough, we can see exactly what was built, the test, the files that were created, the features implemented, and so on. And it is really detailed in how it does it, which is really cool. And here we can actually see a demo video recording that shows us exactly how to use it and how everything works, which is what I really love about anti-gravity is its ability to actually think about every single step, then go on to build the actual application, actually test it by itself, fixes anything that didn't work, and it then gives you a demo that you can use as well, which is really neat. So over here, it's giving me a link that we can use to actually access the dashboard and then test it out as well. Awesome. So here we have our finished application. And just to walk through it a bit, we have the overview, which is where the analytics and everything like that would be. We have client lists, we have the settings, and so on. But the part that we were working on for today was this send proposal tab over here. And as you go, you're able to actually keep evolving your app, adding features, and making it more powerful to your use case. So here for this send proposal, we can see create and send professional proposals to your clients. We have the new client proposal, fill in the client details below to generate and send a proposal. We have the full client name, company name, client email, service requested, estimated timeline, budget, and we also have the project description. So to actually test this out, we want to come to n8n, and what we want to do is actually click on execute workflow. So what's happening here, because we're still in the testing phases, we have to click on execute workflow, but I'll show you later on how to do this in production. So we click on execute workflow and we come back to actually fill in all the information over here. Awesome. So now we have the client proposal, and I've just filled out all the information that we need over here. And I'm just going to click on send proposal. Awesome. Coming over to n8n, we can see that everything ran successfully. But let's actually check to see if the email was sent and if everything's sent as should. Awesome. And we can see that the email sent successfully. And inside, we have our message and we have the proposal as well with all the correct information. One last important thing, when you do want to put this in production, so anytime you're running this, you don't have to click on execute workflow. It just works by itself by just submitting that form. What you want to do is you want to save your workflow and you want to publish it. So that's just making your workflow active. So once you publish it, you click on publish, it'll be live. And next thing you want to do, you want to come to your webhook over here. And instead of using the test URL, you want to switch over to the production URL and you want to copy that. Coming over to Antigravity, you just want to either give this webhook to your agent and say, replace the old webhook with this new production webhook, or you could also do it by yourself by just coming into this app.js and it'll be over here under webhook URL. And what you want to do is just copy from the quotes and paste your updated URL over there. And after doing that, you want to actually push this code up to GitHub and host it on something like Vercel, where anyone on the web can actually have access to that application. Right now, you can only access it locally on your computer. So if that's what you're looking for, something more private, you can leave it as is. But if you're looking for other people to widely use this application as well, make sure you host it on Vercel. And with that, you now know how to connect n8n to Antigravity to build powerful applications. And what I've done here just today was a very simple use case. So imagine what you can accomplish in even more powerful use cases. If you want to get access to the resources I used today, such as the prompt, the brand guidelines, as well as the n8n workflow, then check out the link in my description. Clicking on that, that will take you to my free school community where you're able to grab access to the templates and all the resources used in this video to help you out to build your own solution as well. And in future videos, I'll be diving into anti-gravity and more powerful use cases. So hopefully I'll see you there. Peace.